Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss the DPSIR framework. By the way, we are the group 4 and we are tasked to report this topic. So in this topic, we are expected to understand what is this framework, what are the elements of this framework, and what is the importance of it in our environment, to have a resilient environment. So I hope na maka-learn mo og something sa amo ang report, and without further ado, let's start. In recommendation to the European Environment Agency or EEA on how they should proceed with the development of a strategy for integrated environmental assessment. So the Dutch National Institute for Public Health and the Environment, or RIVM, so propose the use of a framework. So unsa ni siya nga framework? So this is DPSI framework. So what is this? So this framework provides a structure within which to present the indicators needed to enable feedback to policymakers on environmental quality and the resulting impact of the political choices made or to be made in the future. So this framework also is a conceptual model which can be used to define the cause and effect relationship among the human needs, the human activities, negative trends, cascading social, environmental, and economic change, and also the institutional policy and programs to improve conservation. So, this framework na gaim ni siya to understand the real drivers which are sometimes unique to the local situation, and then to identify the implement and most effective responses to remove or at least reduce the pressure. So this framework distinguished, D stands for driving forces, P stands for pressure, um, S is stand for state, and I is stand for impacts, and R is stands for responses. So this became known as the DPSIR framework, no, and has since been more widely adopted um, by the European Environment Agency, acting as an integral approach for reporting, like in the European Environment State of Environment reports. Who created the DPSIR framework? So DPSIR framework, isa ni siya sa mga original nga tools nga gidevelop by the OECD, or Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, in 1993. And EEA, or European Environment Agency, in 1995 for the adaptive management of SESS. According to DPSIR framework, there is a chain of causal links started with the driving forces, it's either economic sector or human activities, through pressure like emission or waste, to state, no, physical, it's either physical, chemical, or biological, and impacts on ecosystem, no, human health ba, or and function eventually, to leading mga political responses like prioritization, target settings, indicators, no. So para masabtan nato og maayo, there is a diagram. We can see the this is the example of DPSIR assessment framework. So diri sa makita nato ang driver, pressure, state, impact og responses na nagform siya og murag cycle or chain ba na siya. So diri sa diverse, ang example ani niya is mga industry, transport, tourism, and development and more, no? Kung matong gi-mention ako ganina nga it's either economic sector or human activities. So diri sa pressure, diri makita nato ang mga ma-produce nga gikan sa industry, transport, tourism, development, ang ma-produce sa kani nga mga sector, no, it's either pollution, land use change, population change. So diri sa state, diri nakabutang ang mga posibleng maapektuhan na ni nga mga pressure, no, sa it's either, for example, sa water, soil, habitat, air, or vegetation quality. So diri sa impacts, ang example niya dira kay health, habitat, fragmentation, economic change, biodiversity loss. So mo ni siya mga impact nga tungod sa mga pollution, land use change, population change, no, maapektuhan ato ang mga water, soil, habitat, air, vegetation na maka-impact sa ato ang economic o maka-cause og biodiversity loss o uban pa. So diri sa responses, diri na siya muak na maghatag og response sa kada sa pressure sa state, sa impact through political responses, like mga action sa kung unsaon pag-mitigate or unsaon pag reduce sa mga epekto ani, o like incentive regulation, taxes, and laws. So to deepen our understanding about this framework, let us hear the discussion of my other members, no, in addressing what is driving forces, pressure, state, impacts, and response. So without further ado, let's proceed.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Clyde Errol A. De La Torre, and I will report the driving forces. So next. So allow me to read. Driving forces. The European Environment Agency, or EEA, describes the driving forces as the social, demographic, and economic development in societies and the corresponding change in lifestyles. Overall, the levels of consumption and production patterns. So the driving forces is are the major underlying cause of change sa industry and competitive conditions. So next. Driving forces. A driving force is a need. So kailangan jud. There are two types of driving forces. The first one is the primary driving forces. The primary driving forces for an individual are the need for shelter, food, and water. The primary driving forces is the needs of the what we call this needs and activities of the individuals, and while the secondary driving forces are the need for mobility, entertainment, and culture. For an industrial sector, a driving force could be the need to be profitable and to produce low cost, while for a nation, a driving force could be the need to keep unemployment level low. So next. The macro environment. In a macroeconomic context, production or consumption processes are structured according to economic sectors. Example: agriculture, energy, industry, transport, and household. So ang macro environment nag-refers to the set of conditions that exist in the economy as a whole rather than in a particular sector or region. In general, the macro environment includes the trends in the gross domestic product, inflation, employment, spending, and monetary and fiscal policy. So, some examples of classes of data on the past and present situation. So, population, number, age, structure, education levels, political stability. And transport, person, goods, road, water, air, off-road. Energy use, energy factor per type of activity, fuel types, technology. Ang power plants is type of plants, age, structure, fuel types. Industry, types of plants, age, structure, resource type. So, daghan pa na siya mga examples. So, ang driving forces is all about changing. So, like sa itong population, sa una, gamay pa. Pero mga pila na katuig, nagkadaghan. Pero pala nga na ang concept niya ba. Then, ang transport, syempre, nakadugay, nakadaghan. Ang atong paggamit sa kurente, nagkadako. Di ka pala sa una. So, that will be all. Thank you.
Pressure. It is the driving forces lead to human activities such as transportation or food production, which result in meeting a need. These human activities exert pressures on the environment as a result of production or consumption processes. Pressure are anthropogenic factors including environmental change and impacts. So pressures are a key element of the driver pressure state impact response causal framework for describing the interactions between society and the environment. Pressures can change the state of an environment since pressure are anthropogenic. Because kaning mga human activities like transportation and food production can nag-exert og pressure sa environment. Usually, these changes are unwanted and seen as negative. So, this can be divided into three main types: excessive use of environmental means consuming resources that we cannot replenish or that cannot sustain themselves at the rate we are consuming them. Second is the resources changes in land use. It is a process by which human activities transform the natural landscape, referring to how land has been used, usually emphasizing the functional role of land for economic activities. Changes in land use trigger feedbacks to the system, stress living conditions, and threaten people with vulnerability. And lastly, emissions of chemicals, waste, radiation, and noise to air, water, and soil.
So third is state. So what is state? State as a result of pressures and state of the environment is affected. That is the quality of the various environmental compartments. So second is state in relation to the functions that these compartments fulfill. So third is the state is the quantity and quality of physical phenomena, biological phenomena, and chemical phenomena in a certain area. So fourth is the state of the environment is described by the specification of the spatial intrinsic vulnerability, spatially combined with pressures and is expressed as a risk. So, ang state is the result of pressure siya sa air, water, ug uban pa. And ang state pod is siya ang quantity and quality sa physical, biological, and chemical phenomena. So, the state of the environment can be divided into three main types. So, first is physical state. So, what is the physical state? So, physical state means the condition that characterize the form of substance at a given temperature and pressure. So, ang physical state nagpasabot sa condition nga nagpaila sa forma sa usa ka substansya pareha sa solid, liquid, or gas. So, next is biological state. So, what is the biological state? So, is a fundamental principle that can be used to build a theory of organisms and their ontogenesis. So, biological state isa siya sa fundamental principle nga magamit sa pagtukod og teorya sa mga organismo ug sa ilang ontogenesis. So, the last is ecosystem. So, what is an ecosystem? So, the ecosystem is a biological community of organisms that interact with another and their physical environment. Or, aron mas masabtan pa, ang ecosystem is mao ang usa ka geograpikanhong dapit diin ang mga tanom, mga mananap ug uban pang mga organismo ingon man ang panahon ug talan-awon magtinabangay aron mamahimong usa ka bula sa kinabuhi. So mao to siya ang ecosystem and maoro man yata to ang state. So salamat.
MFAC, according to European Environment Agency, NFACs are consequences of changes in the state of the environment for the environmental functions. And also, there are several classification purposes for environmental functions. The best no distinguishes four categories. First is supporting. Supporting is nutrient cycling, soil formation, primary production. What is supporting? Supporting is the natural world provide so many services. Sometimes we overlook the most fundamental. Ecosystem themselves could not be sustained without the consistency of underlying natural processes such as photosynthesis, nutrient cycling, the creation of soils, and the water cycle. The processes allow the earth to sustain the basic life form, let alone whole ecosystem and people. Without supporting service, provisional, regulating, and cultural service would not exist. Second, provisioning. Provisioning, it is food, fresh water, wood, and fiber. What is provisioning? Provisioning, when people are asked to identify a service provided by nature, must think of food, fruits, vegetable, trees, fish, and livestock are available to us to direct product of ecosystem. A provisioning service is any type of benefit to people that can be extract from nature. Along with food, other types of provisioning service include drinking water, timber, wood fuel, natural gas, oils, plants that can be made into clothes and other materials, and medical benefits. Third, regulating. Regulating, it is climate regulation, disease regulation, and water purification. What is regulating? Regulating, ecosystem provide many of the basic service that make life possible for people. Plants clean water and filter water. bacteria decompose waste, bees pollinated flowers, and tree roots hold in the soil in the place to prevent erosion. All these processes work together to make ecosystem clean, sustainable, functional, and resilient to change. A regulating is the benefit provided by ecosystem process that moderate natural phenomena. Regulating include pollination, decomposition, water purification, erosion and flood control, and also carbon storage and climate regulation. Cultural. Cultural, it is aesthetic, educational, intellectual, and recreational. As we interact and alter nature, the natural world has in turn altered us. It has guided our cultural, intellectual, and social development by being a constant force present in our lives. The importance of ecosystem to the human mind can be traced back to the beginning of mankind with ancient civilization, drawing pictures of the animals, plants, and weather pattern on the cave walls. A cultural is a non-material benefit that contributes to the development and cultural advancement of the people, including how ecosystem play a role in local, national, and global cultures, that building of knowledge and the spreading of idea, creativity born from interaction with natures and recreation. Impact are often negative in the sense that they affected adversely the functioning of ecosystems relative in their potential performance under otherwise possible condition. Some example of this: genetic, psychologic, or behavioral anomalies. What is genetic, psychologic, or behavioral anomalies? It is genetic abnormalities occur when this is an abnormality in one or more genes. Some genetic disorders are passed down from parents to children through their genes. Second example, modification in the chemical composition of air and water. From that example, it is composition of air and water. It consists of 78% nitrogen, 21% of oxygen, and 1% other gases and water vapor. The composition of air does not change as you travel through the layer of the atmosphere. What changes is the number of molecules. The air molecules decrease and become less. Third, some example, change in the ecosystem functioning. And it is primary and secondary productivity.
Hello everyone, I am your next reporter for today, and I'll be reporting about the last stage of DPSIR framework. So here we have responses. In the next slide, we will discuss more about prioritization, target settings, and indicators. So next slide please. So here we have response. Responses have to do with decision making, depending on the decisional pattern and scale considered relevant. So here we have two main groups of definitions of responses. So the first one is associates responses uniquely to policy action. So this one is dapat konektado atong mga responses in a unique ideas, plans, or isa ka particular na situation na gamito nato as a basis. So, muna siya ang itong first main groups of definition of responses. So, the second one is identifies responses from different levels of society. So, kani siya is dapat nato ma-identify ang mga responses nato from different levels of society, because klase-klase ang mga nasa society. We have ourselves individually. Uh, we have families, culture, and many more. So from that, we should identify the right responses in every different levels. So, muna siya ang kaduhang definition of responses. So, next slide please. So, here we have the table that uses DPSIR's framework. So, here we have letter D, and letter D stands for driving force. And the example is European economy and its relevant sectors or sources like agriculture, industry, energy, household, and etc. So, how does these relevant sectors or sources, production and production structures, application of technology, consumptions, affect? So, here we have the P, and P stands for pressure. And so these sources affects the pressure or emission use of natural resources including land. So we have here the S, and S stands for state. So how does the environment change with the pressure? And pressure means the emission of natural resources including land. So, well, we can notice some changes in physical state like hydrology, landscape, availability of resources, and also we can see some changes in chemical state like in air quality, water quality, soil quality, and also in biological state we can notice some changes like in occurrence of species, and also in ecosystem we might see some changes in marine waters, fresh water, and also in the forest, and many more. So here we have the impact. So what are the impacts of the changing state? So the impacts is environmental impacts. Here we have target indicator response, impacts on other policy issues, and also here we have economic impacts, cost of abatement, and economic repercussions. So by that impact and by that state, by that pressure, and by that driving force, we should prioritize to setting of the targets. So here we gain policies in response. So first, in the driving force, we have macro policy measures. So why we use this policy in response? Because macroeconomic policies aims to provide a stable economic environment that is conducive to fostering strong and sustainable growth. So that's why I use in the table they use macroeconomic for this policy measures. So also we have here sector specific policy. So sector specific policy is policy that usually aims to promote flagship activities within the sectors. And also here we have environmental policies. Environmental policies is a policy that commitment of an organization or government to the laws and regulation and the other mechanism concerning environmental issue. So that's the responses that we should have. So that is the table. I hope you understand. And next slide, please. In this slide, we have the cycles, and the first one is response may seek to control driving forces or pressure, or so-called prevention and mitigation. So, mao ni siya ang nagapangita og ways and naga-control sa driving force or pressure, because by having a great amount of resources, sometimes we tend to abuse it. So the responses are being made, or this is the policies to prevent and mitigate more damages, or to mitigate abuse on our resources. So that is the first in the cycle. And the second one is to maintain or restore the state of the environment to help to accommodate to impacts, so or adaptation. So in the word adaptation, we should adapt the responses and to maintain a good amount of resources and to restore the state of the environment. So that is the second cycle. And the third one is or even deliberate do nothing strategies. So di na siya kanang wala jud kay buhaton na. So ang do nothing strategies is an activity to study the effects developing from a situation and from the backtrack of or to its underlying causes. This technique let us put problem into perspective and into much larger picture. As we keep widening the frame, this larger picture will eventually includes ourselves. So this is the do nothing strategies. So next slide, please. So here is our last slide, and here we have our conclusion. So establishing a DPSIR framework for a particular setting is a complex task, as all the various cause and effect relationship have to be carefully described, and environmental changes can rarely be attributed to a single cause. The DPSIR model is essentially a discursive framework which, in a view of ambiguities, cannot be used as an analytical guide to describe complex issue marked by uncertainty, time, and space scale indeterminances, and social interaction. So this framework has some limitations, and I'm going to explain to you the limitations. And first of all, the DPSIR framework don't have a clear cause and effect relationship, and also we notice a lack of use of dynamic indicators, and we can notice also weak communication between researchers and public, and we can find clear boundary between state and the impact. So that concludes all our reporting. And thank you for listening, and thank you for having your time. And that's all. Thank you. God bless and enjoy your day.